So thanks for your patience while I got all of my connections going. Real quick, for those that don't know me, my name is Roz Roseboro. I'm a senior analyst at Heavy Reading. And for the second time, I have done a survey on behalf of the OpenStack Foundation, whereby we poll a number of service providers from around the world about what they think about OpenStack and some related technologies. And so in 9 minutes now, I'm going to try to give you some of the highlights so you can get a sense for where things are. So first off, though, let me just give you a sense of who replied to this survey. The percentages aren't particularly important here. You see that the sample is somewhat biased towards some of the more developed markets, which tends to be where we see a lot of the kind of NFV and cloud-related developments going. That middle, that second circle is showing the type of operator. Again, it's mostly your converged operators, meaning those that have both fixed networks and mobile networks. The third one is the size by revenue. Again, it tends to be some of the larger operators, and on the far side is the role of the person who's answering the question. And again, you see that it's primarily people from R&D and technical strategy, network planning, people like that, operations people, again, the people that are going to be responsible for deploying things like OpenStack and NFV and managing the cloud. So let's get to the fun stuff, because everybody likes data. So what I wanted to do here was just give you a very quick snapshot of where things were at, because as I said, we did this survey about a year ago, and so what you're seeing here is what has changed from last year to this year. So the first one that says familiarity with OpenStack, that is showing the percentage growth and the number and the percentage of people who said that they were very familiar with OpenStack. So as of October when we did this, it was about a third of folks said they were very familiar with OpenStack. If they replied that they did not know anything about OpenStack, we did not let them take the survey, so just so that's clear. The second one is about where they're at in executing their NFV strategy at the time of the survey. Again, I'm assuming most of you here are familiar with what NFV is, network functions virtualization. That's a big part of what is driving the transformation within the telco community. And you see that that's actually only up about 3%. And that's pretty consistent with what we've seen in some other surveys, because now that we've kind of moved out of the POCs and into production, people are starting to find some very hairy and difficult problems. And so we are seeing some of the growth rates slow down a little bit from what we saw in the first couple years. The next one there is about the percentage of people who are executing their cloud strategy in support of their NFV strategies. And you see that number is up about 9%. And that's important because it's that virtualization is not the end. When people first started doing this, there was a lot of porting of monolithic software to standard servers, but that's just step one. Ultimately, where most of these operators want to get to is a cloudified automated environment. The next one, I was actually quite encouraged. I've been looking at open source stuff for the past couple of years, and you see that the percentage of folks who said they have a lot of experience with open source is up 10%. Again, I think that's encouraging, because when I first started looking at this a couple years ago, people were kind of afraid of open source. They were concerned that it might not be stable. They were concerned it might not be secure enough. But I think people are starting to get past that. The importance of OpenStack, you see that is up 11%, and that is actually a pretty amazing result, and that is actually the percent of operators who said that OpenStack is essential to their success. Again, that's a very positive thing. I think that was 39% of the telcos, and as you saw, it's a pretty broad spectrum of them. I don't think it's on this slide, but it's about 123 service providers that answered the survey. So that's a pretty good size sample. And the last one there is about active engagement with OpenStack, and you see that number is up 10%. And again, I am very encouraged by that, because if you only have the vendors doing it, you're not necessarily going to get the insights you need to your end users. So I think it's critically important that the service providers are getting more engaged. And just for clarity, engagement can mean that you are contributing code either directly to the project or through other projects like OPNFV. Okay? So the next slide here, we're looking at what are they using OpenStack for. Again, a couple years ago, we kind of talked about just kind of OpenStack in general, but obviously there are a couple of different types of clouds. There's your internal cloud, there's a telco cloud, there's the public cloud. And so what you see on the far left is people using OpenStack for their enterprise cloud or their internal IT cloud. And to be honest, I have no idea why that number dropped off so much. So this data came out about 2 weeks ago, and so I'll have to go and do a little digging into that. I think I put a note there that when we did this before, we labeled it private cloud versus public cloud as opposed to enterprise cloud applications. I'm not sure that changing the terminology really made that much of a difference because that's a pretty significant drop. Same thing for hosting. Again, last year we had that called public cloud, and we definitely have seen some telcos pulling away from public cloud, especially North America. Most of them have decided that they don't want to try to take on Amazon and Google and rather partner with them. So that could be what's reflected there. You see that NFV actually did go up, though. It's up to just over a third of them, or a third of the respondents are saying they're using OpenStack for their NFV, and that's up from last year, so that's encouraging. IoT went down a smidge. Again, that could just be a matter of the sample. The sample size was about the same this time, but it is still very early days for IoT, so I would expect that number to go up. And then you see 5G at the very end, that grew significantly. But again, 5G is still, depending on who you talk to, 2 years away, 3 years away from commercial deployments. So this is my favorite slide, and this is the one that people are probably going to be staring at, and we'll get these slides later. Because again, what we're trying to get a sense for here is what is it about OpenStack that people like? Because people don't just deploy technology for the sake of deploying technology. And what's interesting to me is that pretty much for all 5 of those use cases, you see that it's offer services more quickly is the most commonly cited benefit across the board. And again, I think that's important when you take that in context with the fact that we also gave them reduced software costs and reduced operational costs. Again, in talking to folks about this for a while now, it's really hard to get people to get funded to save costs. They don't want to spend money to save money, they want to spend money to make money. So the fact that they're thinking that by using OpenStack they can do services more quickly, I think that's encouraging. The latency, we'll see that a little bit more in a second when I talk about edge computing. But I will say also that these tend to also be the same kind of benefits that people articulate when they're talking about NFV and cloud in general. So I think, even though we said, what is it about OpenStack, I think it's probably kind of conflated with the larger issue of these transformations for NFV and for cloud. And so speaking of edge computing, I know there was that summit back in September, the Open Dev, that was talking a lot about edge computing. So OpenStack Foundation asked me to ask some questions related to edge computing. I've only got one of them here. There is more. And I was actually quite surprised by this. When we first came up with this question, I thought that the most significant reason people were looking to use OpenStack for edge computing was so you could have a consistent stack. But as you see, that was only the number 3, only 22%. The number 1 reason was that it was open source in general. So again, I like seeing the same trend come out a different way. So just like earlier, we saw that more people are more familiar with open source than they used to be. That is what they are valuing the most in this particular use case. And number 2 is actually the modular architecture of OpenStack. Again, I think there's going to be a number of sessions this week talking about the new requirements or changes that might need to be made to OpenStack to make it more suitable for those edge deployments. But the modularity of OpenStack is something that people are already recognizing as a benefit. And then you see in third place, again, came from the consistent stack from the data center all the way to the edge. And I know that was really, really fast because I have tons more data, but I want to let you know there will be a webinar. We haven't figured out exactly when, so watch this space if anybody wants to drop me an email or something, but OpenStack will let you guys know. But we have more information about container technologies. We asked people, which of the following container technologies are most important to you, so we know, Kubernetes versus Docker and things like that. Kubernetes. Actually, it didn't come in number 1, though. I think it actually came in number 2. NFV orchestration projects, this is getting, again, because OpenStack is obviously part of a larger ecosystem of software people are working with, and this is kind of getting to the ONAP and OSM and various other orchestration projects. OpenStack procurement, this is getting into how do people want to consume OpenStack. We've been asking this question a lot, or actually we've asked this question a few times, and people tend to say they want to get a community version, but when it comes down to it, they end up getting a vendor distributed version because they want the support and all that stuff, which is fine. And then, like I said, we have a number more questions about edge computing, some of them dealing with the use cases that people are thinking about them for, some of the things they're concerned about. So this is definitely kind of a teaser kind of situation, but I'm hoping in the next few weeks that we'll have a date for that and you guys can get more information. I have no idea how much time I have left, probably none, but if there's a quick question, I can take one. Robert?
Just a quick point of information.
Yes.
Information on this study and some other research in the telecom space you can find at openstack.org/telecom.
So there. I think I'm at time. Yes, I am, so thanks very much.